Achtung, welcome to We Have Ways of Making You Talk with me, Al Murray, and James Holland. And, of course, James Holland. Well, what are we going to talk about today, Jim? Because, we're approaching our 500th episode. This show is anniversary laden. It always is. This is the great thing about the Second World War. 6 years overlaid of anniversaries, all happening all at once. So what are we going to talk about? Because...
Well, I think it actually is our 500th one today, isn't it?
It's
on
like
a very special day because it's coming out we're recording it on a Thursday, but this is going to be for Monday, the 15th of August, which, as anyone who's a Catholic will know, is the feast day of Santa Maria. And it is also one of the most important feast days in the Maltese calendar, still is to this very day. And it is also the day that marks the arrival of the oil tanker, the Ohio, limping into Grand Harbour in the early hours of the morning, about 7:30, something like that in the morning. And so, obviously, we are talking to our good friend of the show, Professor Timmy Gambin, all the way from Malta, who is, one of the legendary marine archaeologists in the world today. And I think it's fair to say, Timmy, you're pretty obsessed with all this stuff, aren't you?
I am very obsessed. I think obsessed beyond reason would be a good way to describe it.
We like obsession on this show.
What drew you to the subject? Why are you obsessed beyond reason, Timmy?
The simple answer I give is, if you look around the island of Malta, where I was born and brought up, we're surrounded by 7,000 years of history, and I always asked myself the question whether these 7,000 years of history are also reflected on the seabed. So that really got me to sort of into the subject of marine archaeology. But ever since I was a kid, I've been a World War II freak. I made the models airfix, 1:72. I war gamed. We had a big war gaming table. I have to confess that I was on the German side, so I had all the Jagdpanzers and Tiger tanks. And anyway, so in a way, this enabled the work I do now enables me to marry my passion for World War II with the experience that I've garnered in marine archaeology.
And just explain to us, Timmy, I've been over to Malta so many times on various landmark anniversaries, but this is the 80th anniversary of Operation Pedestal. And, what does that mean to you? What does that mean to Malta? It's a long time now. It's 80 years. That's a pinprick in time in one way, but it's... it's quite a long time in another, depending on which way you look at it.
It's a long time because every year the participants get fewer and fewer. This is a reality that we all see if you go to the D-Day commemorations, whichever commemorations related to World War II. Up until 20 years ago, numerous, large groups of people used to come through via the George Cross Society. These are becoming fewer and fewer. However, it is still commemorated every year with a lovely service on the waterfront in Valletta. I just thankfully thanking the organisers. I received my invitation. It's a solemn occasion with quite a few local and diplomatic dignitaries that are invited. So there still is a lot of importance associated with this event, and of course it coincides with this big feast of Santa Maria.
We don't really have feast days in the UK. We're sort of Protestants and a bit more dour about our religious ceremonies. Obviously we have Easter and Christmas and whatnot, but these feasts. I've been on Malta when feasts have gone off. There's fireworks and there's pageants and marches through the street as well as all the church services, and everyone has a good time. But they're a big deal, aren't they? But the Santa Maria is the biggest of the year. Is that right?
Santa Maria is the biggest feast, I think, besides Easter in the Catholic world. It's celebrated throughout the Catholic world. In Malta, there are numerous churches dedicated to Santa Maria, so fireworks will be going off across the island, both in Malta and in Gozo. Let's not forget the Cathedral of Gozo is dedicated to Santa Maria, and Gozo had a role to play in this story too, with regard to saving its sister island from starvation. But we can get to that later. So this massive feast celebrated throughout Malta, and Malta being very much a Catholic country, 1940s, we're still, very much believers, in the sense that in the present day, people going to church has gone, the amount of people, of congregations has gone down. So this was a time when the people still believed, that you can even see black and white footage of Maltese people praying in the rock cut shelters. Any first-hand account of the British, nearly every single one describes how the locals prayed. So there was this belief that God was on the side of the Maltese and the Allies. And I know we're starting at the end of the story, but the fact that SS Ohio comes in on the 15th is too much, and it's believed to be a miracle that saved the island.
Which, I mean, it's completely understandable that would appear to be the case. I mean, it's too good to be,
if you were a Hollywood
true, isn't it?
You literally couldn't make it up, could you? You couldn't
exactly.
make it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, you couldn't, and it wasn't made up, because if we go to the beginning, I mean, this is a massive effort, and to contextualize this for your listeners, some historians have kind of downplayed the role of Malta and the effort Churchill poured into Malta, saying this, with or without Malta, sort of the war would have taken the same course. It's an argument I find hard to believe, not because I'm Maltese, because it starts on a wrong premise. But when you look at a force that had 2 battleships, 4 or 5 aircraft carriers, anti-aircraft cruisers, literally dozens and dozens of ships. Who in their right mind would dedicate such a force to saving an island 17 miles by 8? That's the question I would pose to these who kind of downplay the role. If the role wasn't so important, why would the Allies invest at a time when resources aren't that easy to come by, to put all this into the effort to save Malta?
But you only have to look at where Malta is itself. As a location in the Mediterranean, it's so crucially important in where it is, that of course you've got to defend it, and of course actually you've got to do better than defend it. You've got to make it safe and use it as an offense, a place of offense as well. Because after all, we talk about all the British shipping sunk on the way to and from Malta, but the shipping sunk from Malta. You've got 220,000 long tons of Axis shipping at least being sunk by subs based in Malta. So it's not just the defence of the place; it's using it as an offensive platform that's central to the Mediterranean war effort, right?
Also, not just the ships sunk on the way, but the delays in ships sailing between Italy and North Africa, because they had to take all these detours via the east by the Aegean and so on. The Eastern Mediterranean, sorry. And also Malta being used as a base to attack, because let's not forget that it wasn't the end of the journey for Axis shipping to arrive in Libya. Then there was, I don't know how many thousands of kilometers, or 1,000 plus kilometers, to take those supplies off the ship and to Rommel's troops on the front line. And it was, some of the attacks were launched from air bases here to harass those supply lines. So absolutely, I'm with you on this. I'm not trying to convince you that this convoy should have or should not have been sent. If it wasn't, maybe I wouldn't be here to be discussing this with you.
Well, I think the moment that the Allies are involved in the Mediterranean campaign, then Malta becomes the key bit of real estate in the whole thing, and as you say, Al, it's bang smack in the middle. It's 60 miles south of Sicily. It's 900 miles from Gibraltar, or 800 miles from Gibraltar, 900 miles from Alexandria. I can't remember which one, but it's basically bam in the middle of 2 British assets. 2 key ports, Gibraltar and Alexandria. It's halfway. And it is barring the route And this is the key thing. And this is what our good friend Steve Prince always said to me. I remember saying to me, he said, you've got to consider this is a +1 -1. So you are not only are you denying it to the enemy, you are also gaining the benefits of holding it yourself. And the converse is true if you lose it. So it's not just a question of just losing it. It's also the gain it makes to the enemy if the enemy takes it. And that is why Malta is so absolutely vital to the whole thing. And you really can see in that, in the Benghazi stakes and all the rest of it, the kind of toing and froing back and across North Africa and Libya and Egypt, up until the kind of autumn of 1942, you can really see the rise and fall of Allies' fortunes as an offensive base in chime with the fortunes of the Allies in North Africa. Yeah. So when Malta is doing well, an absolute classic example, the second half of 1941, where Force K is ravaging Axis supply lines, sinking, I think all 12 merchant vessels and set 5 out of 6 destroyers escorting them in November 1941. 77% of all Axis shipping being destroyed and sunk in between September and November 1941, and then that is followed by Operation Crusader, which is broadly a victory for the British, and so it goes on. And when Malta is being absolutely pummeled in the spring of 1942. Then immediately after that, Rommel launches his offensive, and it goes well for the Axis and badly for the British. So you can see it chiming, and this is why in the summer of 1942, when Britain the Allies have just suffered this catastrophic defeat, the loss of Tobruk, 8th Army retreating back to the Alamein line, just sort of 60 miles from Alexandria, tails between their legs. Why Malta and the future of Malta is so absolutely vital to the whole thing. Because if Malta can be saved, then it can be used as an offensive base once more. Yeah. If it can be used as an offensive base once more, then it can harass Rommel's attempts to build up for his final and what he hopes will be his decisive attack, which ultimately ends up being the Battle of Alam Halfa, launched on the 31st of August 1942. And so it's absolutely crucial in this month that Malta is saved. And as we know, the miracle happens, and it happens with the Ohio inching through the breakwaters of Harbour on the morning of the feast day of Santa Maria. God clearly was on the Allied side, and the rest, as they say, is history. The 6 fuel tankers that Rommel needs all get sunk. Alam Halfa is disaster. He gets thrashed at Alamein, and in May 1943, the North African shores are in Allied hands. End of story. Jay, job done.
You've explained the broader. You've explained the story on a very strategic sort of broader level. But whilst all this is happening, there is a real crisis on the island in the sense that people cannot put food on their plates. There is no fuel to drive the pilots from their billets to the airfield. Because there's no food, then the pilots are also getting the infamous Malta dog, because of malnutrition and so on. So there is a very, if you want to call it, an existential crisis on the island. And let us not forget that pre-war, there was a stratum of Maltese society who were pro-Italian. So the Allies always, had that in the corner of their mind, that could there be a subversion of the population, sort of saying, listen, we're suffering too much for the Allies. Why don't we turn towards the people who seem to be winning at that time? So there was this crucial balance to be kept. How much to squeeze? How much food to negate the population and the defenders. So negate is perhaps gives the wrong connotation, but these were decisions that had to be taken. And to come back to Gozo, at one point the British governor convinces the Bishop of Gozo to release grain that is stored in order to alleviate the starvation. But it's not uncommon. So when my kids were in school, they were asked to do a project on World War II, and my youngest son interviewed my mother, who was still alive at the time, and this is a recurring theme. And one of the main things that people remember about the war, people when they were kids, was the hunger. I've heard stories of, families opening a can of corned beef, and in those days, when we say we were Catholic, we were very Catholic, 8 children, So this would be 10 people slicing a tin of corned beef, between 10 children. Never, seeing a banana would be something that is literally out of this world, and slicing it and sharing it between the entire family. These are sort of real and documented scenarios which the island was facing in 42.
Well, so to talk about the legacy in Malta itself, stories like that must have created a very powerful sense of Maltese identity and shared suffering and shared experience. Yes.
Absolutely, and the British were very, very, very clever in recognizing it, because the king visits in the middle of the war. The king turns up in Malta, and thousands of people turn up in the streets. So this, if there was any doubt as to where the allegiance of the islanders, World War II secures it. We have the language question. So up until the early 20th century, Italian was the official language of Malta for the court. You have circumstances where a British serviceman does a civilian crime, is taken up to court in Malta in the 1920s, and the court case is in Italian. This guy is so totally dependent on his Maltese lawyer. So there was still very much that Italian influence. I think World War II completely swings it in favor of the Allies. So the King visits, and then Churchill visits, and Roosevelt visits as well. Sort of, this is between 42 and 43, I believe. So it gives us, it forms very much part of our identity. And if you are in any doubt, look what flies every day proudly on our flag. Yeah, we are known as the George Cross Island, and that was given to the people of Malta, to every single individual, not just the fighters, even to the population. I think in recognition of all the suffering that they did go through.
Yeah, I mean, it really is incredible, because, of course, up until early part of 1942, Malta has been repeatedly attacked by the air. I mean, as early as the 11th of June, the day after Italy enters the war, 1940. But obviously it builds up to a massive crescendo in the early part of 1942 when the Luftwaffe arrives once again for the second time on Sicily, and the plan is to completely render Malta absolutely useless as an offensive base. I mean, it is absolutely to kind of sort of smash it into the sea. They
are nearly successful, because the 10th flotilla is asked to leave. The airfields are put beyond use. One of the first the first consignment of Spitfires is shot up before they have time to take off again. I mean, the situation is dire.
It's absolutely dire. And just remember that the Maltese people have to go through that. And the number of bombs that falls on Malta in this time is similar to the amount that's dropped on London in the entire Blitz. And, you think how small Malta is. It is absolutely incredible. It's completely relentless. It's throughout the night. It's throughout the day. Every 2 minutes people are going into these shelters. Homes are bombed out. They're completely destroyed. They're having to not just go into shelters, but actually live in the rock like kind of troglodytes. It's a fetid, dank, disease-ridden, horrible existence. And then comes the hunger. So the air raids lessen. The RAF and Al, we can talk about this at another time. But the RAF win in the air in sort of May and June, July 1942. But it doesn't alleviate the hunger, and obviously it just gets worse and worse and worse. And there's intense rationing. It's 10.5 grams of bread per day per person, which is rarely being met, incidentally, and that's further lowered later on in the summer. An adult is lucky to get 1,500 calories.
Well, even some of that bread would be contaminated, for example, mixed with diesel or oil, because it was lifted from a sinking ship, for example. And so even some of what was being distributed. Yeah, and I
remember talking to John Ajus, who was a great man who lived through who became a great friend of mine, and who lived, was working as a RF clerk. in what was then Scott Street in Valletta every day. And I remember him arriving back with some bread, and absolutely, it all just tasted of petrol. I mean, it was just absolutely revolting. I mean, they could eat it but it was, by any normal standards, it would be considered completely inedible. And of course, it was just accumulative, because what happens is they run out of coal, so there's no power station. So then they're dependent on kerosene. The kerosene then runs out. So there's absolutely nothing. There's no means of getting trucks out from A to B, so there's no means of transporting stuff. But what was really interesting was some years ago, I remember talking to Simon Cousins, who's a great sort of amateur historian on Malta and a great collector, and he picked up a whole load of documents from the chief medical officer of Malta at a flea market in Malta some years ago, and these were incredibly revealing, because they showed that the situation was even worse than many people had anticipated. And they were saying things like, whatever you do, don't flush the toilet. This is a waste of water. Wash bandages and use them again at the hospitals. Don't wash your hands. I mean, these are the absolute basics of hygiene, and these were being kind of saying, whatever you don't do that. Things got so bad that they started using human feces as fertilizer, and it completely backfired. There was a typhoid outbreak, and 99 people died as a result. Already weakened because they were so hungry. So this is not some lightweight siege. This is proper old school medieval style siege, and it's utterly brutal. I mean, really, really brutal. And when General Alan Brooke visits on the 2nd of August and has a on his way through to Cairo, and talks to Lord Gort, who by that point is the governor, Gort has been trying to give a sort of slightly upbeat message to it, and Alan Brooke is utterly shocked by what he sees.
James, we're talking about food rationing, but let's remind our listeners that even ammunition was being rationed. The anti-aircraft gunners were being told you can't fire more than X amount of shells per air raid. So not only are you hungry, but you can't defend yourself either. It was, to use the word again, pretty dire, not just from a food point of view, fuel, but also ammunition was extremely, extremely limited.
I know, it's terrible.
Did the people of Malta, because after all, you're talking about Gort talking to Alan Brooke and then their appraisal of what's going on. Does how bad things are, strategically and tactically communicate itself to the population, to all the ordinary Maltese, or are they not really in the know as to how dire things are?
That's a really good question, and one of the incredible things about the story of Malta and World War II is that the Times of Malta, which is still published to this day, kept on issuing in the war it gets fettled down to, I don't know.
It's 4 pages, isn't it?
4 pages, but the Times of Malta does keep the population informed, obviously with a massive dose of bias, in favour of the Allies, because its editor and owner, Mabel Strickland, was a massive Anglophile. And there is what is called the rediffusion. It's a kind of cable radio, which was in many households, and people who didn't have a rediffusion.
And it was in public squares and things, wasn't it?
They would listen to news, and they knew that. I honestly believe that the population knew that they were sort of destined to play an important role, or they were in fact playing an important role in destiny, kind of in the destiny of the war, so to speak. So I think that yes, they were very, very, very much aware.
Because after all, with the Ohio's arrival on August the 15th is people sing in the streets, don't they? A crowd turns out, a bugle's played, people stand in silence. That there's this moment of this clearly of great deliverance and of significance and religious significance as well. And people obviously know that they really need this fuel tanker to have made it into harbour.
The fuel tanker, the food that's delivered, the ammunition, everything it is literally not just being deliverance; it's deliverance that is being delivered. Sorry, because it's people are lining the 17th and 18th century fortifications to welcome the Ohio.
Yeah.
And the Ohio does have this, there is that iconic photo of it limping, helped by two other ships. But let's not forget all the other warships that either didn't make it to Malta and were lost on the way, and there were quite a few. Probably around 500 people lost their lives in the short distance between Gibraltar and Malta, and also many of the merchant ships that didn't make it. So Ohio and the other vessels, delivered deliverance for the island and the islanders.
Now, Timmy, as an archaeologist, what evidence is there? Because James has talked on the podcast about aircraft relics and bits and pieces on the island. But as a marine archaeologist, is Malta surrounded by crashed Junkers and Messerschmitts and Spitfires, or what does the ocean hold?
So the last time we counted, I had a PhD student, Tony Burgess, who now graduated, so he's a colleague and a friend. And one of the things that we did was we went through various records and we compiled. Well, he compiled and I helped. There are anything up to 1,000 aircraft lost in the waters around Malta. Now, when we say in the waters around Malta, think of it in its broadest sense. Anything between southern Sicily and North Africa.
Okay.
I think James promised that we would bring this up in another episode. Why? Not so I can be invited again, but because there's so much to talk about. We're the only nation in the world that has aircraft from 4 different countries. So there are German planes, Italian planes, American and British.
Wow.
Then, so all present within our waters. Besides that, the whole plethora of nationalities: South African, Polish, British, New Zealand, Australian. Either were shot down and died off Malta or survived and went on to fight elsewhere. So the simple answer is yes, our seas are full of these remains. But whilst we're talking about wrecks, this convoy that we're discussing, Operation Pedestal, did leave quite a trace of remains along the route.
Yeah.
Not just of Allied ships. Let's not forget that at least 2 enemy submarines, Axis submarines, were lost. One U-boat and one Italian.
Yeah.
Okay. The U-boat was rammed by the Wolverine. And
one of my favourite destroyers of the war, incidentally.
Yes,
this is the ship that carries. Oh gosh, the name's momentarily gone out of my head. Bill Tennant out to Dunkirk to take over as senior naval officer at Dunkirk on the in the afternoon of Monday, the 27th of May, 1940. So there you go.
But one of the major losses in Operation Pedestal is, there are only 2. The vast majority of aircraft carriers lost in World War II were lost in the Pacific.
Yeah.
2 were lost in the Mediterranean. HMS Ark Royal, which was discovered and filmed, and I think there was a documentary made about it. But very few people know that the second aircraft carrier to be lost in the Mediterranean, HMS Eagle, which I believe, I stand to be corrected, is the first aircraft carrier ever built by the British, or a vessel converted into an aircraft carrier. I believe it was the hull of a battleship originally.
Yes, a Chilean. It was a Chilean battleship. It was an Almirante Latour class battleship the British were building for the Chileans, and then said, no, actually, we're going to keep that and turn it into an aircraft carrier.
Exactly, and again, I stand to be corrected, but I think it was one of the first aircraft carriers. So this is, from a technological and historical point of view, this is hugely important, because we all know the impact of aircraft carriers on modern warfare. Adding the third dimension to naval warfare and so on. So So to be able to, yes, we have the plans, etc., but there are other stories to be told. What is its current state of preservation? It's a war grave for quite a number of Allied seafarers. So it would be nice to understand what state of preservation, how it lies, where the torpedoes hit, whether that matches the description of the survivors. It's in deep waters, but this fixation that I have, that I said is beyond reason. I've already done my research, and I've narrowed down the search area to a needle in a haystack rather than a needle in a barn, so to speak.
Well, there's some other big ships. Of course, there's HMS Manchester as well. Which was scuttled, having been hit by a couple of torpedoes, and so there's that.
Very controversially, actually.
Yes,
the scuttling of the Manchester was quite a controversial decision, I believe.
Yes, the captain was court-martialed, wasn't he? Got into all sorts of trouble for it, and some of his officers as well. So it wasn't just him. The entire commanding cadre got into real trouble for that.
I think they were. I think that, to be honest, I think that was a total stitch up. I mean, because what you have to understand is when your engines are knocked out, it's just not your means of being able to move forward or reverse that's at stake. Your whole electricity supply is cut off. Your guns don't work properly. All sorts of things don't work.
You can't get ammunition and shells from the depths, from the guts of the ship up into the turrets because your electric lifts are gone.
Yeah,
all that. So it just doesn't. It's completely useless. If you can't fire and can't achieve anything, then it's And the bottom line is it's just sitting there as a sitting duck. Yeah. And there's no means of getting it back. The year before it had been badly damaged, and they had managed to get it back to Gibraltar successfully. But they spend kind of well over an hour trying to get this thing up and running, and it's just absolutely shot to pieces. I mean, it's just they all realise it's not going to happen, and so they make the decision to abandon ship and then scuttle it. Well, I can't really see what else they could have done, to be honst.
Yeah.
HMS Nigeria was lost with, I believe, over 50 people lost their life. Indomitable, Victorious, Cairo, Foresight, Kenya, Ledbury. So those, there's quite a long list of ships in one mission in just a few days.
Yeah.
And then you've got all the merchant vessels that were lost, of course, which was...
The merchant vessels, Wairarama, Clanferguson, Glenorchy, But just reading the report, okay, so at 02:47 on the 11th, Colesford Screening Force attacked Asdic Contact. At 04:45, fueling commenced, and then 38 Spitfires for Malta were flown off Furious. Eagle torpedoed at 11:15 on the 11th. At 2 o'clock, 3 destroyed. There's constant action from the 11th to when it arrives in the 15th. The list of ships we mentioned, we were firing off, the amount of people lost. We need to put this into a kind of temporal context. All this is happening in 3 days.
Yeah. It's quite extraordinary.
It is. I mean, except for the Battle of Matapan, where I believe 3 Italian ships, but the number of lives lost is much larger than this. In a way, the size of the force of Operation Pedestal saved lives because there were so many other vessels that went and picked up the survivors. So, for example, the Jaunty, which was a tug, in the middle of all these capital ships, you had a tug, Jaunty, and it went and picked up numerous survivors from the Eagle, for example. But I still believe that I have yet to come across such an intensive battle at sea over such a short period of time.
We need to take a break right now. We'll be back in a second. Welcome back to We Have Ways of Making You Talk with me, Al Murray, and James Holland. And we're talking to Timmy Gambin about Malta.
Timmy, one thing is the fate of the Ohio. So it comes in, it's barely able to it's barely floating. It's kind of sort of inches before the water is kind of brushing over the decks. So it actually does make it into Grand Harbour. It's got this huge gash in the side. Its rudder's bent. Its engines are dead. It's all over the place. It's obviously never going to see action again.
It's missing alcohol and stores, because when they were thinking about abandoning it, some crew members actually from other ships jumped on board and stole the booze and other supplies. So no. There are accounts of moments of chaos in this operation. Yes. Operation.
Well, there's a moment where they abandoned ship, isn't it? And then they
exactly. And that was when some people saw the opportunity to go and raid. But anyway, sorry, I digress. But
it's reached Malta on the 15th of August. Everyone's cheering, hooray! People are waving flags, the bands are playing, Malta's been saved. But then what happens to it? It gets unloaded. All the fuel is siphoned off. That's great. Then what happens to it?
She's semi-refloated and docked in a bay called Rinella, and I will dig up in this crazy research that we've done. I will dig up a photograph. She was used as a billet for, I think, Yugoslav troops. I stand to be corrected, and I do have a black and white photo of these troops jumping off and swimming. She was basically like a kind of holding holiday resort, so to speak, for the last year, I think 45. And then in 1946, she was taken out in two pieces. The forward section was taken out towards the southeast of the island and gunned. So I think she was used as target practice and then sunk. And I'll dig up this photo. I have a photo of her hull being sunk outside the Grand Harbour.
I'd love to see that.
We do have a project. Wow. We do have a project to in this 80th anniversary to go out and find this the stern part of her hull. Obviously, completely stripped, but you can strip the brass propellers, the guns, but you can't strip the soul of a ship. No. Her story is very much with her. So that is why we want to go and
so at the moment, no one's ever dived on it. No one's ever dived on it.
Not to the best of my knowledge. No. The problem is this, okay, that after the war, the British, all the way up to the late 1950s, there are so many hulks and twisted pieces of hulls and whole hulks and so on that are littering the harbour. That a series of projects are made. First of all, there's the UXO. The seabed in the harbour is full of mud, so if a bomb doesn't explode, it's going to penetrate the mud. When we excavate in the harbour for older stuff, we always sort of in our risk analysis mention this possibility of unexploded ordnance. So we tell our students or our participants, if you see something like this, basically that's a 500 kilo bomb. Don't continue excavating. No, it's not an artifact worth losing your life for. So there was UXO, a big project for UXO to be cleared from the harbours, and then systematically these hulks were, now a lot of them were taken out and scuttled in a particular area. So there are literally dozens of pieces of hulls and 1/3 of a submarine, the hulk, emptied hulk of a destroyer, for example. There are literally bits and pieces of Italian U-boats which were surrendered to Malta and then cut up and thrown out. So we have to make our way through all of these until we can say this is the stern of the Ohio, and this is all apart from the wrecks that were sunk by enemy action. Well, these were scuttled. Then we have the scuttling of the HMS Stubborn, the P-39 to train anti-submarine pilots on, etc., etc. But these are all concentrated within a very limited area.
Wow. And they're all marked with buoys, are they, and everything? So you know where they are?
No. We know where they
God.
are because I spend many days out at sea, and next time you guys are in Malta, I'll take you out with our sonar, and we are systematically mapping the seabed around our islands, and systematically marking when we can verify. So we know where HMS Russell went down. We found her, documented her, etc. HMS Russell is World War One. So I digress. But so slowly but surely we're mapping all of these out. But there's so much, and anything from Sopwith camels that fell into the sea in the 1920s, which were based here, because we were a British colony. So anything coming out, any military or naval technology that is coming out of Britain comes to Malta nearly immediately. So we have our first, flights, which are very early. Some things like the Brennan torpedo are installed in Malta, and we have everything from these very early planes to stuff from the Cold War.
Right.
Okay,
wow.
With obviously two peaks in World War One and a massive peak in World War Two.
How extraordinary!
Incredible. And do you think so? Do you think a part of the Ohio might be researched and discovered?
No, absolutely. It's I won't rest until we dive, and we can. So far, we've done 2 dives, thinking it was the Ohio. So we have the No-Ohio 1 and the No-Ohio 2. So hopefully it's third time lucky, and we'll get the Ohio.
And
that's right.
Say, Timmy, you were to want to dive on the Eagle and locate the Eagle and film it and all that sort of thing. How would you put?
I was just going to say that.
How do you put a project like that together? I mean, do you need a submarine? Do you use drones? How do you do all this sort of stuff?
I have everything ready. The first thing you need are 3 mad people discussing it on a podcast and putting that podcast out to the public. So there may be a producer out there or a billionaire out there who wants to, who shares our passion and our dream. So that's the first step is established. The 3 of us are together and we have this dream. It's actually, the technology is there.
Yeah.
We would need an automated underwater vehicle.
Yeah.
I have one, but mine is rated only to 1,000 meters. Where the Eagle is somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 meters. But automated underwater vehicles do exist for those depths. This is a
torpedo. It's incredibly deep. I didn't realize the Mediterranean was that deep.
And the Battle of Matapan is in the deepest part of the Mediterranean. It's 4,000 meters deep. But anyway, that's it. So we would need a research vessel, an automated underwater vehicle which has a side scan sonar on it. We would plot what we call a lawnmower pattern around the area where we believe the Eagle is. Obviously, I would explain the rationale to you two and to the producer, the fictional producer, why we're looking here, and I would present the historical evidence which I have accumulated over the past.
He holds up sheets and sheets of paper.
Okay,
yes.
So it's all here and here. Then, on the basis of the targets that we would come up with, we could. An aircraft carrier is pretty distinct. I mean, I would be, we know the length. I mean, with the kind of sonar that we're using at this point, I'm pretty confident that if we have a target, we'd be able to say, listen, with the software that we use, we'd be able to compare that to the length of the Eagle, etc. And then once we have the target, we would proceed with an ROV, a remotely operated vehicle, which is obviously, can withstand the pressures of 2 to 3,000 meters, which do exist. We're not talking sort of, fantasy 20 years time. These things, the projects done by Vulcan, pushed by Paul Allen, who's actually his dream was to find every single aircraft carrier lost in World War II. They were busy, in the Pacific, ticking all those boxes, and unfortunately,
he's passed away, hasn't he?
He's since passed away, and with him his legacy of looking for and discovering these ships. So the technology is there, and not just him and his former vessel. So we would have to choose the time of year. So that would probably be July, because we'd get long stretches of good weather. It's not as detrimental as, I don't know, for example, the search for the Hood, where you have very small weather windows of Iceland, be it winter or summer. Winter is impossible. Summer is like worse than our winter here. But so the technology is there. It would probably take us, I would say, 14 days. Now, if we're lucky, I have other research which, we can go and look for we can go and look for the submarine sunk by Wolverine, because if Wolverine is one of your favorite ships of the war, how cool would it be to this was an incredible action. She saw a submarine which was a threat to the rest of the convoy. The captain had no hesitation, rammed her amidships just behind the conning tower at 26 knots. You're talking about 35, 40 kilometers an hour. Crazy, but anything to get the convoy home. So if we could convince the fictional producer to spread it to 3 weeks, we could go and look for other stuff. Of course, in the meantime, planes have fallen off the Eagle. Planes are falling out of the sky that are attacking the convoy. We have the lists, sort of literally blow by blow, the account, Tartan lookout, attacked contact, foresight, hit by aircraft torpedo, and we have the approximate position, for example. So everything's been prepared. I think it would be just amazing. I would just cut out the bit from Scotland to Gibraltar. Yeah. I wouldn't do that part. First of all, nothing was lost. Secondly, it's a bit grey and uncomfortable. I would meet you guys in Gibraltar. Cruise. Okay. Are you fine with that, Al?
Listen,
you like it?
I'm signed up. Where do I sign? Seriously, I'm all over that like a rat.
Let's see.
But seriously, how much money would you need would one need to raise to get this off the ground? I mean, are we talking millions? Are we talking a couple 100,000? Or what?
Couple of 100,000. We're looking at something like anything between 50 and 75,000 a day,
right?
With top of the range equipment, and then it depends, because if you partner up with an institution that has either the vessel or some of the equipment, then your costs come down, because there are other elements. I mean, yes, we would be looking, for the HMS Eagle. That would be the ultimate goal, but we would also want to know, what is the marine life growing on this ship now? Has she become sort of an artificial reef at depth? And is she, so there are other questions. Will climate change have an impact 2 kilometers down, or is it out of range, so to speak, of future climate models? So there are other benefits that can be had from a project like this.
Wow, it's just fascinating, isn't it? Really is
incredible.
Tantalizing.
Yeah.
I'd also like to know where Upholder is.
And I have an idea. The problem is that I think I need probably to live till I'm about at least 145 to get all the pipe dreams that I have. But one step at a time.
One step at a time. Let's do Ohio, then Eagle, then Upholder. Great. Okay.
Absolutely, it's a deal.
Well, Timmy, I mean, thank you, and have a wonderful feast day of Santa Maria.
Yeah.
Send our very best to the rest of Malta.
Yeah.
And, thank you for coming on the show again.
Yeah. It's been fantastic talking to you, Timmy.
Oh, brilliant. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I will follow up by sending the images and whatever else you may need so that you can share with your audience.
Magic. Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Do that.
Excellent. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you all again soon. Bye-bye.
Cheerio.